Hello and welcome to Stitches and Stories at the Baker State Library and Archives. I am the author, and this evening I will be reading a guest-suggested story, Untold Places. This is a relatively newer story that has found its way into the heart of our generous benefactor. I am pleased to share this harrowing tale with all of you. At the end of tonight's reading, I will announce our chosen book for our first session of Baker's Books. As always, we have refreshments available on the back table and storage for codes, so please feel free to indulge while you get settled. Heart still beating after running like mad, I can't help but laugh. We did it! We pulled off the biggest heist this town has probably ever seen. Ansel and Wes really deserve an ale for planning this. Did you see that guard's face? Gillen guffawed. I thought he was going to piss himself when Tell turned into a bear. Adrenaline and pride swelled in my chest. The others laughed loudly. I tried to shush them, but it was hard not to laugh as well. Guards are still after us, you idiots. Pipe down! The snickering quieted, but didn't quite go away. We dragged the chest further into the cave. I still couldn't believe it. 10,000 gold and a whole bag of maps. We had the world in our hands, and it was all thanks to— Oi! What do you mean your plan? Gillen argued. And there it was. I'd hoped it lasted more than 10 minutes this time. He and Wes worked so well together, but the mulish pride between them always got in the way. Now, gentlemen. Ansel's laughter was replaced with gentle reprimand. Let's not spoil our hard-earned win so quickly. Mind you, there are still men after us, and we can't afford to come to blows. There was a brief pause before the dull thud of a punch. And there they go. Wes slammed back into the wall of the cave, staggering from the blow Gillen had landed. Lads, this is not the time! I tried to intervene, but it was too late. Gillen had gone in for another hit, but Wes was too fast. He grabbed Gillen, shoved him into the wall, and pulled back to punch, but it never hit. A loud cracking sound paused their squabble. The wall that they'd been fighting against must have been weak and ready to fall if Wes's skinny ass was enough to break it. Wes and Gillen fell screaming into the darkness, leaving Ansel and I to gawk. Wes! Gil! Ansel shouted after them. We moved forward but quickly lost footing. The cracking did not stop at the cave wall. The ground beneath our feet began to crumble. We crashed for what felt like whole minutes before we finally came to a stop. Groaning, I got to my feet in near pitch blackness. I could hear the others moving nearby. Looking around, I could faintly see the firelight from our torch. Far, far above us. Sound off. Who's not dead? Wes coughed out. A round of eyes and a few mumbled complaints from Ansel. We're alive, but where the hells are we? I asked. In a cave, idiot, Gillen snarked. And whose fault is that? I snapped back. I could barely see the dwarf, but I'm sure he was scowling. All right, enough. No more fighting. We need to find a way back up there before... We jumped back as the cave continued to crumble. What little light there was now gone. Fuck, I can't bloody see! I reached out and cast a gentle yellow light that illuminated the others. I don't think we can go back that way. It's still breaking apart. I looked around. There were several tunnels leading to God's nowhere. I turned back to the others. Wes, Ansel, you two can see in the dark, yeah? We need to pair up. I can only keep this light up for so long. We need to find our way out of here. Everyone shared a look before nodding. I've got Tell. Ansel looped his arm in mine and grinned at the other two. Gillen sputtered, I'm not going with him! Before Wes could protest as well, I jumped in. Stuff it. This is both your fault. Once we get out of here, you two can go back to your aggressive foreplay, and I can focus on getting drunk in the next town over. The blush that crawled to the end of Wes's pointed ears and Gillen's squawk of indignation was satisfying, and it even set Ansel off laughing again. Now, let me see if I can find a way out. I sat down, crossed my legs, and reached out with my magic. There wasn't a lot of green and caves for me to work with usually, but there was a pull of nature through one of the tunnels. There, I pointed, might lead to an opening. We'd been walking for nearly an hour and still nothing. There were some offshoot tunnels, but nothing that stood out to us. The light had extinguished a while ago, and it was complete darkness. I could hear Wes and Gillen walking ahead of us, shockingly quiet. Ansel had one scaled arm around my shoulder as we walked, guiding me in the dark. He huffed a quiet laugh and leaned close enough I could feel him speak against my ear. "They're holding hands," he murmured. I whispered back, "I wonder how long till they admit it and finally just fuck." Ansel pushed his snout into my neck to snicker quietly. Ignoring the rushing feeling for the contact, I stifled my own laughter. We continued on for another hour before Gillen piped up. "We've been at this for too long. Are we getting any closer?" Ansel's gentle claws on my shoulder stopped me. "I don't know," I admitted. "The feeling is still there, but it hasn't gotten any stronger or weaker. It's just there." I tried to reach out for a stronger connection, but there was nothing I hadn't already found. Ansel tensed. "Did you hear that?" Everyone fell silent, listening. There was a faint shuffling coming from behind us. "Hide!" Ansel grabbed my hand, led me into what felt like another tunnel, and after a moment, he pinned me against the wall and held his cloak over both of us, whispering something I didn't understand. There was a slight shimmer, then darkness again. I felt Ansel against my ear as he very quietly said, "Invisible." We waited. Just a moment passed, and then I could hear something moving through the tunnel we had just occupied. Ansel tensed, his arms slowly moving closer as if to shield me further. The thing never paused, just kept on moving. It wasn't until Ansel let out a slow breath and drew back that I relaxed a little. "What was that?" "Dunno. Something with long arms. It was carrying a dead deer. Fresh, judging by the smell." Ansel spoke very quietly, wary of alerting what had just passed us. "So there's a way out nearby then. We need to find the others." I paused. "Do you think you can track the smell back from where the deer was killed?" I could hear Ansel taking a deep breath, but before he could answer, there was an echoing scream. Hand in hand, we quickly made our way toward the sound of fighting. There was a loud, echoing shriek that forced me to drop Ansel's hand and cover my ears. There was a flash from one of his lightning spells. The cavern was briefly illuminated, and in the center was a hulking creature that had its arms raised, ready to strike Gillen. Ears ringing, I reached out without thinking, and before the light faded, I saw a vine sprout from the ground and start to wrap around the creature. Another shriek, and I was only able to cover my right ear this time. The noise was so loud it felt like something had hit me over the head. The warm trickle of blood that started from my ear was concerning, but I refused to drop the vines until the thing was dead. The ache worsened, and other than the occasional light from a spell, it was still pitch black. I was too disoriented to focus on casting another spell. Ansel would need to handle this with what little help Gillen could provide. It only took a few more brief flashes of lightning, and then quiet was restored. Once I was sure the thing was dead, I dropped the spell and clutched at my head. The sound echoed in my skull, in my teeth. After a moment, familiar claws gently pulled my hands back and cut my face. "Ansel, can you bring up a light?" I nodded and cast the spell. Warm light filled the cave. "God's below, is he alright?" Gillen asked. "I'm fine," the screaming blew out one of my ears. I mumbled. Taking Ansel's offered hand and standing up, I looked around. "Where's Wes?" Gillen frowned. I don't know. The thing," he pointed at the creature on the ground, "came at us and we got separated." He stepped closer to the body, kicking it with his boot. "What the hells is it?" "Gillen!" Wes's shout came from another tunnel. We took off running. The tunnels were like a maze, with almost no rhyme or reason, and before long, my light spell started to give out. Gillen whipped around and grabbed me by the shoulder, shaking me. "Do it again. We need to find him." He looked desperate. "Let him go, Gillen. Breathe. We will find Wes, but you cannot panic right now." Easy for you to say. You can see in this cursed place, you scaly bastard. While they began to bicker, I tried to reach out one last time with my magic. I didn't have much, but I had to try to find an exit, and quickly. No change. Just the same faint but steady stream of nature. I cast another light spell, and froze. A little ways up the cave there was blood, fresh and scraped along the floor like something had been dragged. Lads, come take a look at this. They continued to argue, and as I turned back to shout at them, I screamed. There were 3 more of those things sneaking up on us from behind. Run! More and more of those things popped up out of other tunnels, chasing us. We got split up in the chaos, but I had managed to find a crevice to hide in. I extinguished my light and tried to slow my breathing. I could hear the galloping pace of those things as they ran past my hiding spot. I waited and listened. After a while, my eyes seemed to adjust, because I could see a very faint light. Blue? It was coming closer. I didn't move, too scared to lose my hiding spot. After a moment, a faint blue outline of a cloak was moving past me. Magic armor. Ansel, I breathed out. The cloak paused, and the hood pulled back to reveal familiar green scales. Tell? I wriggled out of the crevice and clutched at him. What the fuck do... He put his hand over my mouth. Quiet. They can't see, but they use sound to get around. I got stuck, and they walked right past me. I nodded, and he moved his hand. We have to get out of here. There are too many of those things. He dipped his head and took my hand. We set off. As much as I hoped we would find Wes and Gillen, the chances were getting slimmer with each passing moment. It was a miracle alone that Ansel found me. Neither of us would admit it, but we knew our goal was survival, not rescue. We spent another few hours navigating through the dark, avoiding any shuffling noises. Finally, Ansel paused. I could hear him breathing in deeply. I think I smell fresh air, he murmured. I squeezed his hand, and as quickly and quietly as we could, we followed the scent. After another 20 minutes, Ansel sped up like we were getting closer. We must have been making enough noise to attract something, because as soon as we rounded another corner, Ansel let out a strangled gasp. Ha! Got you, you nasty little shit, Gillen growled. I threw up a light and froze. The hilt of Gillen's sword was sticking out of Ansel's gut. Ansel looked down at his stomach, and then back at me before dropping to his knees. Ansel, God's above and below, I thought you were one of those things. Gillen's voice was hollow. I helped Ansel to the ground. I can help. I can do this. I can heal. I was beginning to panic, but Ansel put a clawed hand on my face. You have 1, maybe 2 spells left in you. Not enough to fix me. He coughed and blood sputtered out. You need to leave me here and run. The smoke came from there. He pointed. I am not just going to leave you here. I can't. You can't die. I kept the tears from falling, but just barely. Ansel was right. I had nothing to fix this, and he was fading fast. He grimaced a bit before smiling at me. I'm not getting out of here, but you have a chance. You and Gillen need to leave before they find you. Please tell. I held his hand and began to cry. There was a shuffle next to me as Gillen sat down. Ansel, I'm such a stupid, bloody bastard. His voice was choked. At least you finally figured it out. Ansel laughed roughly before falling into a coughing fit. He grabbed at my shoulder and pulled me close. His voice was soft. I love you, Dylan. Take care of my books, yeah? His grip loosened, and he was gone. A hollow pit sat in my gut. And for a long time, there were no words, just choked quiet sobs. When I felt like I couldn't look at Ansel's closed eyes any longer, I pressed a kiss to his head and whispered my goodbyes. I stood and turned toward the cave he had pointed at. I looked back at Gillen, who hadn't moved. "Are you coming?" He shifted, but didn't get up. "They killed Wes," he replied, voice thick. Without waiting any longer, I started walking down the tunnel. Leaving Ansel's body was harder than leaving Gillen. I made my way alone. My spell was beginning to fade, but soon enough other light started to replace it. Cracks in the ceiling were illuminated, and there was a faint flow of air. I was close. Another turn, and there! Very early morning light seeped in at the end of the tunnel. I bolted. I was nearly free, nearly out of this hellhole. The exit grew as I got closer, and I picked up speed, not caring about the noise I was making. But just as I reached the mouth of the cave, a lanky figure appeared ahead of me. It was one of those things, crawling back into its damned lair. It was carrying a dead fox, and I had run full tilt into it. We stumbled to the ground, and it screeched at me. It got to its feet and swiped at me before I could blink. It was blocking the exit. I crawled backwards, but it advanced. Coming at me with blinding speed, I turned and ran, desperate to find somewhere to hide until it left and I could just fucking leave. I spotted a small tunnel, low to the ground, but just big enough I could squeeze in. I dove in and crawled forward, but I made enough noise in my scrabbling that it found me anyway. I could feel it reach after me with its long, spindly arms. I crawled farther up the cave, and it crawled after me. There was barely any room to turn around, but I shot one of my last spells at the creature, a magical force that pushed it back out of the tunnel. But I put too much strength in the spell, and it collapsed the entrance to the tunnel. I was back in the dark. I was back in the dark on my belly in a tunnel so small I couldn't even fully turn around. And the exit had been right there. I wanted to scream, to cry, and shout until these damn tunnels finally took me just like they took everyone else. I lay there, walling in my own misery, cursing Gillen for being Gillen, cursing Ansel for leaving me here alone, cursing Wes for recruiting me, cursing myself for joining his little gang of idiots. Exhaustion began to set in, but I was stubborn. I was either going to get out of here or die trying. I started crawling forward. The tunnel slowly began to narrow further, but I didn't care anymore. I was going to keep moving until I was crushed or ran out of air. At one point, things got so narrow I could only wriggle forward, my arms at my sides, and my boots scraping me along. At one point in my exhausting crawl, I realized I could no longer lay my head on the stony ground. It hung over a slight ledge. I had reached something, but it was dark, just like everywhere else in this horrible place. I had enough energy for one last spell, if only I could get my arm in front of me. Breathing deeply and using all the strength I had, I pulled my arm from my side and bent it under my stomach. My sleeve tore as the stone clawed into me. Wincing, I heaved again and pulled my arm towards my head. It was now at a painful angle, wedged awkwardly, my hand against my chin. Ignoring the stinging pain of my flesh pulling away, I managed one last push, nearly dislocating my shoulder. But my arm was free, and in front of me, I let out a delirious laugh and sent out my last spell. That familiar soft light lit up a small cavern with a single tunnel that was blocked by a long, lanky creature. It knelt, one arm extended, slowly crawling towards me. Its mouth was open, displaying jagged teeth. It breathed deeply, and as it approached me, it lowered its head. I gave up. There was no escaping this. I let the thing lathe its slimy tongue over my bleeding arm. I let it smell my head and lick at my face. I let it pull me from the tunnel, and I let it drag me away from any hope of escape. A dark and dreary tale, but one I just can't get enough of. The hope and loss and love never fail to move me. I hope you feel the same, dear guests. The accompanying art created for this story highlights the final sad moments of Dear Tell. Nevertheless, the story must come to an end, and I must announce the book that was chosen for our new book club. We shall be reading The Losing Alchemist. Please feel free to stop by the front desk for a copy and join us during our meeting next month. We thank you for attending Stitches and Stories with the Baker Estate Library and Archives. Have a pleasant evening.